They paid for ocean views, peace, and family time. But one call to hotel security changed everything. What happens when a black family is treated like intruders in the resort they paid for? What they did next made the whole beach go quiet. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. To anyone watching from the balcony or strolling past with a cocktail in hand, the Obesai family looked like the embodiment of vacation bliss. The sun was setting over the Gulf Coast, casting a golden sheen over the pool deck of the luxury Port Murata Beach Resort, and the air smelled faintly of sea salt and citrus. Marvin Obesai leaned back on a padded lounger, one arm behind his head, the other wrapped around his youngest daughter, Ava, who had fallen asleep in her towel. His wife, Camille, sat beside him with her Kindle resting on her knees, periodically glancing up at their two sons, Devin, 13, and Jamal, 9, who were racing each other in the shallow end of the infinity pool. Marvin, 42, had taken an early sabbatical from his job at an engineering consultancy to finally spend uninterrupted time with his family. It had been Camille's idea. After 10 years of maybe next summers, she had insisted, no laptops, no calls, no meetings. Just sun, water, and time. For the first 3 days, it had been perfect. Room 1703 had a view of the ocean. The concierge had remembered Camille's birthday and sent chocolate-covered strawberries. The staff, though formally polite, had been helpful enough. The resort was full of couples, retirees, and wealthy families on break. The kind that wore coordinated swimsuits and never seemed to lose their key cards. They had drawn some glances, sure, but nothing unusual. Black families were still a minority in spaces like these, but the Oasis were used to navigating that. Camille joked that her wide sun hat served as armor. Marvin just smiled and said, "Let them look. We're here." But on Thursday afternoon, something shifted. It started when Jamal returned to the lounge area, holding a plastic cup of lemonade. He'd gone to the refreshment table near the spa entrance, where a large dispenser with citrus-infused water and lemonade stood under a sign that read, "For guests only." He handed the cup to Camille and whispered, "The man said I shouldn't be here." Camille's brow furrowed. "What man?" Jamal pointed. "Over there. The guy with the shirt and the walkie." Camille looked up to see a tall man in a white polo shirt and navy cargo pants standing near the towel station. He wasn't hotel security, at least not visibly, but he had the stance. Arms crossed, headset in one ear, sunglasses still on despite the fading sun. She stood and walked over, calm but direct. "Excuse me," she said. "My son said you stopped him?" The man turned. He was white, mid-40s, ruddy complexion. "Ma'am, I just asked if he was with a guest." Camille blinked. "He is a guest. We're all guests. Room 1703. "I see," the man said flatly. "We've just had some concerns." Concerns? There were reports of unsupervised children accessing amenities without bracelets. Camille lifted her left wrist and held up the bright orange silicone band. "We all have them, right?" "Of course," the man said, but he didn't sound convinced. "I'll make a note. Just doing my job." Camille returned to the lounger, jaw tight. "Everything okay?" Marvin asked. She shook her head. "You know that thing. That tone. That I'm just doing my job tone." Marvin exhaled slowly. They let it go, but it didn't end there at 7:10 p.m., while Devin and Jamal were playing tag on the artificial lawn behind the pool deck. Two uniformed security officers approached Marvin and Camille. "Sir, ma'am," one began. "We've had a report of guests disturbing other patrons." Camille stood immediately. "Who reported that?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but we'd like to ask some questions." "Can we verify your room number?" Marvin, calmly but firmly, said 1703. Under Marvin Obesai. Check-in was Sunday. We're paid through Saturday. The second guard, younger, more tentative, glanced at a clipboard. "Yes, that matches." "And?" Marvin asked. The first officer hesitated. "We've had more than one report." "About what?" "Noise. Possible property misuse." Camille's voice was icy. "Are you accusing our children of something?" "No, ma'am. Just following up. Standard protocol." Camille stepped closer. "There's nothing standard about this." Other guests had begun to watch. A woman in a wide-brimmed sun hat 2 cabanas over was whispering to her husband. A teenage girl raised her phone discreetly. Marvin glanced around, then at his sons, now walking back, confused. Ava stirred in his arms. He looked the officer in the eye and said, "We're going to our room. If you need anything further, you can contact us through the front desk." And with that, he stood, lifted Ava, and led his family toward the elevators. Behind them, one officer murmured into his radio. Camille heard it. She didn't say a word, but her expression said everything. The elevator ride to the 17th floor was silent. Ava was still half asleep, her cheek against Marvin's shoulder. Devin stared at the floor tiles, earbuds in, but no music playing. Jamal kept glancing at his mom, waiting for a signal, a smile, a shrug, a joke to cut the tension. It didn't come. Camille was pacing mentally. She'd seen this before. Not this exact scenario. Not resort security trying to turn a peaceful family into a problem, but she knew the rhythm. The insinuation. The polite escalation. You didn't belong. You made others uncomfortable. Now you must be managed. In the suite. Marvin set Ava down gently on the bed, tucked her into the blanket, and stood at the window. The sun had dropped behind the waterline, leaving the sky a deep orange smear above the darkening waves. Camille sat at the table and opened her laptop. Her fingers moved fast, pulling up the reservation confirmation, payment receipt, scanned IDs. "All ready, just in case. We didn't do anything," Devin muttered from the couch. Camille looked up. "I know. They looked at us like we were stealing something. You weren't. But they didn't care." Marvin finally turned around. "They never do." At 9:06 p.m., there was a knock on the door. 3 short raps. Camille's stomach dropped. Marvin opened it carefully. 2 sheriff deputies stood in the hallway, flanked by the same hotel staffer who had confronted Jamal earlier, still in his polo shirt, arms crossed like he had just caught someone shoplifting. "Evening," the taller deputy said. "We've had a request to check on a report of disturbance coming from this room." Camille appeared behind Marvin. "A request from whom?" "I'm not at liberty to. You're in our room. You can either explain what this is about or get your supervisor." The younger deputy glanced at Marvin. "Do you mind if we step inside?" "Yes," Marvin said without hesitation. "I do mind. Unless you have a warrant or probable cause, this isn't happening." The hotel staffer interjected. "They were involved in multiple incidents earlier today." Camille stepped forward. "Incidents? You mean our children getting lemonade and playing on the grass? That's your version of an incident?" "Ma'am, let's not get defensive. Get your manager," Camille said sharply. Her voice cut through the hallway like glass. The younger deputy tapped his radio. "Dispatch, we need a supervisor to Port Murata, Suite 1703. Guest is requesting management presence." No escalation. The hotel staffer stiffened. "This is unnecessary." "No," Marvin replied. "Your behavior is unnecessary." 30 minutes later, the resort manager arrived. He was thin, balding, and visibly uncomfortable. His badge read Stephen W., Guest Services Director. "Mr. and Mrs. Obeisai," he began, trying to smile. "I want to personally apologize for the inconvenience." Camille folded her arms. "You sent law enforcement to our door. That's not an inconvenience. That's an escalation." Stephen winced. There was a report from a guest who felt alarmed. "By what?" Marvin asked. Stephen hesitated. "They cited unsupervised behavior, children being disruptive, loitering." "We were at the pool," Camille snapped. "With bracelets. With ID. With our children. What exactly do you think we're doing here, casing the lobby?" Stephen raised his hands. "I understand your frustration." "No," she said. "You don't." The deputies finally left. No citations, no arrests, just a thank you for your cooperation and a half-hearted enjoy your evening. The hotel manager promised to review the matter internally and offered a $100 resort credit, which Camille refused without blinking. Once they were gone, the room was heavy with quiet. Marvin sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. Devin was pacing. Jamal clung to his mother's waist, still unsure if they were in trouble. Camille knelt beside him. "You didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. "Okay, none of us did." Jamal nodded slowly, but the shame, the doubt, had already begun to settle in, and Camille felt it too, the kind that doesn't come from guilt, but from being seen as a problem long before you ever say a word. The next morning, the obeisas stayed in. Camille let the blackout curtains stay drawn longer than usual. Marvin made pancakes in silence, flipping them with mechanical precision. Jamal and Devin barely touched their plates. Ava, still unaware of the night's events, played with her stuffed rabbit in the corner, humming quietly to herself that it was vacation. But it didn't feel like one anymore. Every knock on the door made Camille tense. Every voice in the hallway made Marvin glance toward the peephole. The resort, with its polished tile and pristine service, had transformed into a surveillance zone. They weren't resting. They were enduring. Camille stared at her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. She had opened the resort's official Instagram account, then closed it, then opened her Notes app, then closed it. She wasn't afraid to speak. She was afraid of what would happen if she did. Would it make things worse for Marvin? Would it traumatize the kids more than the silence already had? But something inside her refused to let go of the previous night. She stood. "I'm going to the front desk." Marvin looked up. "Cam, I'm not yelling. I'm not crying. I'm asking for accountability. I'll come with you." They left the kids in the suite with a tablet and room service menu. Downstairs, the lobby was bright, calm, and eerily indifferent. A couple checked out with cheerful chatter. A concierge offered sunscreen to a sunburnt guest. Nothing about the space suggested confrontation had ever taken place. Camille approached the front desk. The clerk smiled. "Good morning. How can I need to speak to your general manager," Camille said softly, but firmly. The smile faltered. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Yes," Camille said. "It's regarding the fact that we were subjected to police presence in our suite last night without cause, and no one has given us a clear explanation for why." The lobby quieted slightly. Not completely, but just enough for people within 10 feet to hear her tone. The clerk's eyes widened. "One moment, please." They waited. Marvin stood beside her like a wall, silent, but present. A few minutes later, a woman in a black blazer approached. She had the kind of neutral expression only years of customer relations could build. Her badge read J. Ellis, General Manager. "Mr. and Mrs. Obeisai," she greeted. "I've been briefed. I understand you had an unpleasant experience." Camille nodded once. "We want a record of what happened. We want the name of the person who reported us. And we want to know what corrective actions will be taken." The manager exhaled slowly. "I'd like to discuss this privately. I'd like it documented first." She paused. "I'll prepare a written statement." "Thank you," Camille replied, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Back in their room, Camille finally sat down and wrote the email she'd been composing in her head all morning to the general manager, to the resort's parent company, to the local tourism board. She laid it all out, the timeline, the false assumptions, the escalation, the trauma to her children. She included her family's credentials not because she needed to prove anything, but to strip the situation bare of ambiguity. "My husband is a licensed structural engineer with 2 decades of experience. I'm an education policy specialist working with underserved communities. We paid full price. We booked early. We followed every rule. We were still treated like a risk." She didn't demand compensation. She demanded answers. That night, after the kids were asleep, Camille and Marvin sat on the balcony. For a while, they said nothing. Then Marvin asked, "What if this goes nowhere?" Camille didn't answer immediately. She sipped her tea, then said, "Then at least our kids saw us say something. That was it. That was the cost, and that would have to be enough." The next day, they returned to the pool, not because they felt welcome, because they refused to disappear. Camille had pressed Devin's hair into tight coils that morning and helped Jamal into his swim trunks. Marvin tied Ava's braids back with a soft pink band. No one spoke about what had happened, but their silence wasn't fear. It was purpose. "We came to rest," Marvin said as he packed their towels. "Let's do it." Down by the water, the atmosphere was familiar, but not the same. As they stepped onto the pool deck, Camille immediately noticed it. The eyes, not overt, not hostile, just tracking. The concierge at the towel stand smiled too quickly. A woman with blonde curls adjusted her sunglasses when Devin jumped in the water. A man near the cabanas lowered his phone slightly and turned his screen away when Camille passed by. They weren't just seen. They were observed. Jamal, always sensitive, felt it too. "Why's everyone looking at us?" he asked, curling next to Camille on the lounge chair. She smoothed his hair gently. "Because they've never seen strength wrapped in joy before. But we're just swimming. That's the strength." An hour later, a resort photographer made his rounds. He was snapping candid shots for the resort's guest memories display. A looped photo feed in the lobby, an app. He pointed his lens toward Jamal and Ava, who were building a sandcastle in the kiddie area. Camille stood and walked over. Please don't photograph my children. The photographer, startled, lowered the camera. I'm with the resort. These are for promotional. We don't consent, she said calmly. Remove the photos. He nodded quickly, tapping at the camera screen to delete the images. Understood. Sorry, I didn't mean. But Camille was already walking away. Later that evening, back in the room, they found a letter slipped under the door. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Obasai, we would like to offer you a complimentary spa experience or sunset cruise as a courtesy for the recent discomfort. We value your feedback and hope to provide a positive experience during the remainder of your stay. Port Murata Management. Camille held the paper without emotion. Marvin read it over her shoulder and said, a massage for erasure. Camille dropped it into the wastebasket. She was done with performative peace. That night, she posted no names. No photos. Just a plain black square and a caption. When you pay $4,300 for a beachfront suite but are still treated like a suspect because your children are black, that's not service. That's surveillance. We belong everywhere. Hashtag Port Murata, hashtag Black Family is not a loophole. She didn't expect it to go viral, but it did. Within hours, her phone began to buzz. Friends, former colleagues, even strangers. Some shared their own experiences. Others demanded to know the name of the resort. Others simply wrote, thank you. Marvin sat beside her in bed, watching the numbers grow. This could blow up, he said quietly. Camille nodded. Let it, because silence had cost them enough. By the next morning, Camille's post had over 18,000 likes. It had been reshared by travel bloggers, advocacy groups, and even a few well-known public figures. The comments were a chorus of validation and outrage. This is why we don't feel safe anywhere. I had the same thing happen at a resort in Florida. Security accused my son of wandering. Black joy will always be revolutionary. The official Port Murata account posted a generic message. We are aware of a guest concern and are reviewing our procedures. But it was too late, because the Obasis were no longer isolated in their experience. That afternoon, a man approached them on the beach, a white guest in his 50s, wearing a golf shirt and sandals. I just wanted to say, he began awkwardly, that what happened was wrong. I saw it, and I didn't speak up. I should have. Camille simply nodded. Next time, she said gently, don't wait for it to go viral to know it's wrong. The man nodded, ashamed. Understood. On their final evening, the family walked the boardwalk as the sun dipped low. Ava rode on Marvin's shoulders. Devin held Camille's hand. They stopped at a small cafe and shared one giant banana split. Just as they'd promised on the drive down, they didn't talk about the incident. They didn't talk about the future. They were present, fully, for the first time since it happened. And in that presence, something healed. Not all the way, but enough to continue. When they checked out the next morning, the front desk was quiet. No apologies, no confrontation. Just a clipped, have a safe trip. As they turned to leave, Camille noticed a young black couple entering the lobby, hand in hand, smiling. The woman gave Camille a brief, knowing glance. Camille held it for a moment, then nodded. The line was unspoken, but it was clear. We see you. We've been you. We're still standing, too. Back home, Camille didn't post anything else. The story had already traveled. The world had already watched. Instead, she printed out a photo from their first day, the one Devin took, with all 5 of them smiling in front of the waves. She framed it and placed it in the hallway by the front door, not as a memory of what was ruined, but as a reminder of what they protected. Marvin passed it one morning and paused. They tried, he said softly. They did, Camille agreed, but they failed. In the end, it wasn't a lawsuit or a headline that defined the Obasis story. It was the decision to stay visible, to be seen. Even when it's easier to disappear, to protect their children not just from harm, but from silence, to name injustice. Calmly, clearly, completely. And to never again apologize for existing. Not in resorts, not in boardrooms, not in the world, nowhere.